A lot of us look up to high-level athletes and model our training after them. But what is harder to see is the level of attention to detail and self-awareness that makes these high performers great. Just like you need to train your body, you need to do the work between your ears. This cerebral work pays dividends, and all high-level athletes have done it or have a coach who knows how to optimize their performance. Over the next 3 episodes, we're going to teach you how to improve your athletic self-awareness.
In part 1 of this series, we discuss workout strategy and pacing. Then we discuss all things game day execution, teaching you how to properly implement and adjust your strategy and pacing plans. Today, we will share the importance of film review, helping you become more self-aware so you can optimize your workouts.
All right, part 3. So we started with building a strategy. Executing on a strategy was number 2. And then the kind of third step of the circular loop is actually, you've already done it, and now you have to review what you've done to then make a new strategy for your repeat. So it's kind of like the circle of life.
This is the truth teller of like, did you actually assess and pace correctly? Did you execute in the workout? And now you're going to learn all of that about yourself. Most of the time it's no. And then you can learn from that.
Yeah. For me, this is my time that I have to come face to face and embrace shame.
Exactly.
Videos and I'm like, oh, I rested for a minute. I thought that was 5 seconds when I was going.
It really is so funny that in a workout, you feel like you're getting back on the bar quickly. But then when you watch your video, it's like, wow, that was 15 seconds. And the next one was 25 seconds. You can lose so much time, but that's why you do video review.
That alone, regardless of
that's it, end of podcast.
No, whether we get into any other strategies about video review, if people just saw that about themselves, would that help?
I think 100%. I was kind of shocked in CrossFit because I don't think I've ever played a sport where there was so much fatigue where then there was a stopwatch to dictate how fast you were moving. Yeah. In wrestling, you get tired, but you can usually like slow the pace of a match. In football, there's so much rest recovery. So this was like the first time where I was in the middle of workout. Let's say I'm doing thrusters, drop it, feel like I'm taking a couple breaths, get back on the bar and honestly think if you had come up and asked me afterwards, like, hey, how long was that rest break? 5 or 10 seconds. I took 3 breaths and look at a video and it be 20
We just watched an episode
seconds.
of Friends, bro.
Yeah. Or you feel like you're still moving fast. You're like, oh, I did those thrusters fast at the end of sprint finish. And you look at them and you're like, wow, I was doing them 2 times as slow as when I first started. So I think that self-awareness made me realize how much discipline you need in your mind when you're fatigued like that. Like you need your behaviors and habits and rest breaks all like automatic. So you're not thinking because the little thoughts like, oh, should I chalk break can really be like 5 to 10 seconds really quickly.
Totally. I had a coach in high school that used to say the eye in the sky never lies. And it's very true. The camera. The camera's the eye, right? And so it's really hard for those people maybe that feel a certain way and like they kind of tie everything to their emotions. I totally get that. But taking that objective approach first allows us to really see, okay, where can I improve? And then we go from there to maybe the more emotional side of like, why do I feel these ways in workouts? And then you can kind of talk to a coach or go back into your training program and change things based on that feedback. But I think the first step in video review is getting all like the objective numbers, right? Yep. Like we are watching a workout. Let's pull up one of these workouts, Max, so we can kind of walk through this.
So just to remember, we had 3 workouts we were reviewing: 50 cal row, 50 strict handstand push-up, 50 cal row. For time was workout number 1. Workout number 2 was 50 double unders, 5 snatch 145, 50 double unders, 5 snatch 185, 50 double unders, 5 snatch 225. So those weights are for Brandon. So the equivalent female adjustments would be about 70% of that. And then workout number 3, 10 rounds for time, 15 cal row, 15 burpees. So 3 very different format workouts. I think we'll go through all 3 of them kind of in the same way. So,
so the people have some context that maybe didn't watch the first couple videos. You should go back and listen to those because I think it gives some context for why we're doing video review. But with any of those, I do the workout, whether I execute well or not, whether my emotions say that I did well or not. The first step, in my opinion, would be review the video and get your splits. Just like get all of the numbers down on paper first before you really dive into
people who've never heard that, what's a split?
So for example, in the first workout, what I want to know is how long did it take me to do the first movement? So 50 cal row. Now, obviously that's a little bit longer than maybe like 10 thrusters and 10 burpees in a workout, but I want to know what that time was. And then at the same time, I want to also write down my pace. the idea here is that you can get an idea of are you deteriorating across the 50 cals? Did I go out too hot? Maybe I went to 1600 cals per hour, even though my goal was 1200 cals per hour. And then there's a huge drop off. Or maybe I overpaced, like a lot of people do. They started too slow and they were able to speed up at the end. But by just getting those numbers on paper first, I can come back and then have that, like, talk to a coach. Maybe Max is my coach and I'm talking to him like, why did I start at 1600 or why did I start at 800 calories
per hour? So continue. So for that workout, what numbers are you writing down for all of it?
Hold on. Before we go into that, like any one workout, I think I like to try to think of the objective review as basically like there's 4 data points that you're trying to go after. So Brandon said splits, and the first split would obviously be like, how long did it take to finish the first exercise? What you're looking for is, first, how long does each exercise take when you're doing it straight through? So even if it's a couplet going back and forth, like 15 cal row, 15 burpees, or a chipper like the 55, 55, 55, you want to finish the completion time of the work of each movement as you're going through it. Then within that, a row, there's no like breaking. You're just kind of rowing straight through. But the next movement is strict handstand push-up. So you're going to have your time and the amount of reps that you did there, but almost everyone is not going to do that unbroken.
Right.
So you also need to get your rep breaks, which would be kind of data point number 2.
Yeah. So for the handstand push-ups, maybe I did, if I was in a good space, 5 sets of 10 or 10 sets of 5, 10. You would want to know exactly where those were.
Yeah. Then within that, it is helpful as a deeper layer to get your total amount of time per rep of all of those sets, because you might have done 10 reps, rest 5 seconds, 10 reps, rest 5 seconds. But if you look at it, maybe in the last set of 10, you do a handstand push-up and you hold for 2 seconds overhead, breathing, and then bounce really hard and do another one. And that last set of 10 actually takes you twice as long because of that. And you can start to play with that concept to figure out, hey, maybe more sets of smaller numbers that stay quick might be better off than trying to do them unbroken. Yep. So that would be data point number 3, which would be rep speed of all your reps. And then reps number 4 would be kind of the transition from one to the next. So if you're going from row to the handstand push-up, generally the way that I'll take that is I'll stop the clock right when they finish the row and then start it again once they kick up to the wall. So then it gives you all the transitional times between. So then when you go through all of that, I guess.
So the distinction there is like, you're not going to start the timer when they get to the wall. You're going to wait till they kick up, and that plays out amongst every movement. So don't make the mistake of just going to the area, right?
Yeah. People will oftentimes, they'll transition quickly sometimes, but then chalk their self and rest, take a couple breaths, and then kick up on the wall and do something. But the leaderboard doesn't care what you're doing in that time. It's all just transition time. So if you kind of look at all of those together, that will give you your total time. And then that allows you to kind of go in and nitpick and figure out what's your new strategy from there.
Yeah. It's easier to kind of, when you talk about transitions or like rest time, when you're talking about a faster paced workout. So that last workout is probably a better way to describe that, which we can in a second. But that's step number 1, is going through and having an objective review of all of the numbers. And then once you do that, Max, as a coach, I think you're thinking about the athlete of like, okay, now how do I, based on their subjective feedback, help them in training to get better, so that it is this kind of like circular loop, right? Because we're going to go back to this first step, which is the assess and then
re-strategy.
Re-strategy, like come up with a new pacing plan so that you can get better at these workouts. So when you have an athlete that comes in, maybe they're doing the row, handstand push-up row, and they just like bomb in the handstand push-ups. We get all those numbers. What are you talking to the athlete about to help them game plan maybe a better pacing strategy, or it's just like, hey, we need to train handstand push-ups to get these better? Yeah.
So assuming we're doing this video review, you can do it for multiple reasons. I would encourage video review just in general. There's so much sports science data about people looking at themselves doing something and learning skills faster, getting better at doing it. Everybody I've ever seen in the top level of sport, I think partially because of Instagram culture, films a lot of their work and goes back and reviews and watches it. So I would encourage, just in general training, it is a good thing to do. But talking here, like leading in, we're getting ready for the Open and quarterfinals. They're basically reviewing it to go back and redo it on short time frame. So when I go through, I have all the data, which I we can talk about how we get all of those data points for each workout afterwards. But when I'm helping them to re-strategize, I'm asking them subjectively, like, what happened? Did you break mentally when it got hard at a certain time? I'll just ask them questions like, hey, this second row was 3 minutes slower than your first row. Do you think it makes sense to start a little bit slower the next time and then row harder at the end? Because then you start to have them use the awareness that they gained from watching their first attempt to make a better first strategy. And in the beginning, or like even at the intermediate stages, your first strategy and your first attempt is always going to be pretty far away from your best.
Right.
It's very hard to get to the point in a sport that's random and chaotic and you're learning all these skills that you can just see a workout, jump in and do it near your potential. The people that are training CrossFit full time all day, every day, 6 days a week. They do all the skills, they touch EMOM. So it's easier for them, I think, to execute well. And they don't maybe get as much of a benefit from the video review process. But that subjective side is kind of like putting some information to the data I have without the context of being like, you know, hey, you did 25 sets of 2. Did you do that because you were pacing, or did you do that because you got to failure really early and you can only do 3 unbroken?
Right. And those are 2 completely different concepts there too, right? Some people do just overpace because they're afraid of blowing up in a workout and maybe they have much more potential. Some people have to do that because they're going to truly blow up, and or maybe their max set is 3 and so they have to do 2s.
Yep.
The style of training and how you would evaluate that athlete and then how you would train them is going to be completely different. You know, maybe someone can do 5 sets of 10 and they're really good at handstand push-ups. We would train them differently than the person that can only do 3 unbroken strict handstand push-ups.
Yeah. And also I think how they talk to themselves needs to change in a different way. So the more conservative athletes, generally speaking, from what I found, you make a game plan and then they stick to it perfectly and they finish and they're like, oh, that was good. And then you have to talk to them in a more aggressive way. Like, okay, your strategy wasn't at your limit. Let's push the pace now. Now you're going to do bigger sets or you're going to shorten all these rest times. For the athlete that's more aggressive and tends to blow up more often, you have to figure out how to lower their arousal when they go back and do it. So if you're an athlete that's doing that for yourself, the only way to really know how you operate on a regular basis is to strategize workouts, execute them, review them objectively, watch them, redo them. And over time, you'll start to realize like what your patterns of behavior. For me, like always going out too hot, partially because of how I'm built and partially because like just how my psyche works. So yeah, just like push. Everyone's around, everyone's racing. Like people say they're going to go at 1200, they get a 1400. That fires me up inside. I go faster. I'm just very easily pulled into my emotions when I'm competing in a CrossFit type setting. So I know that. And if I have somebody helping me with strategy, generally it's to keep me on a slower pace in the beginning. And that learning process, I think, is just really valuable for athletes.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and break these down. We can start with workout 1 and kind of go through that process of how we would objectively pull the data and then how we would actually review it. If you're my coach, you can pretend to be my coach right now. Okay,
Brandon. we need a lot of work. I was at one point. You were. 202014 regionals was our last thing?
Yep.
Yeah. There was Wadapalooza in there back in the day.
I think it was the same
year. It was a decade.
It's crazy how fast things go. All right. So workout 1 is pretty straightforward as far as video review goes because there's only 3 different movements and 2 of those are the same with the row on the front and the back end. So 4 time, 50 cal row, 50 strict handstand push-ups, 50 cal row. Even though it's simple, there's still a lot to learn from video review, especially with the handstand push-ups because that's a huge bottleneck in the workout.
So assuming your row monitor has to show when you set this up, so you can actually see it.
And by the way, I would always recommend that, or at least have someone that's writing it down for you because that changes a lot, especially in high turnover workouts. Like we'll talk about workout 3, which is the 15 cal row and 15 burpees. You want to know what your pace is and if there is any deterioration.
Yeah. The other alternative, I think, is in the row history. If you set that up as 50 cal row, undisclosed rest or undefined rest, 50 cal row, and you start and stopped it, you can go into the rower and I think it'll split the data into like 10s or something like that. But that one's relatively easy. Row is different than something that has reps in it. So instead of rep per second there, you're getting paces of it, but you'll have a start time and a finish time. So for the first row, it's 0 until when you finish the row.
Right.
Then transition will be from the rower to the wall, like we talked about. That would be transition 1 of the workout. Then you kick up and you do your handstand push-ups. Brandon said he did 5 sets of 10. So you'll have basically the time it took to get from 0 to 10, then the break from 10 to start 11, then 11 to 20, the break from 20 until 21. Then you do that all the way through until you go to 50. Then you'll take your time from the wall on your last handstand push-up until you're in the seat. And I like to do in the seat and handle and start to move the flywheel as my transition time. And then you get the same data in the second row as you got in the first row. So when you go through that, it kind of gives you all of the things that you need. It gives you the time per movement. The rep per second pace in this is really kind of how did your cal per hour pace go, or maybe broken into per 10 cals of the workout. Then your breaks of all your handstand push-ups, your rest breaks, and your transitions, and that gets you your total time.
Right.
When we sit down and go through that workout, that basically will give us the insight into where is there time to save and how did it feel? Like, did you get to the workout and did you drop the hammer? Did you get off the first row and have a quick transition, or were you blown up and you needed to kind of slow down before you kicked up? So that's where that's the only place that the subjective context discussion can start. Like Brandon was saying, it's kind of like your unemotional time to dig into a workout is the objective review. That needs to be done before you start analyzing how did you feel in the execution and what got to failure and, were you proud of it? Because you can't really make a smarter strategy without first seeing how you actually executed, not how you felt about the execution or how your body felt in the execution, but the actual execution itself.
Yeah. There are a couple of things, even in a simple workout, that you could look for. So let's just say that we're talking about me as an athlete, and this is like probably the only workout that I could still do relatively well on because I can row and do handstand push-ups.
Not true.
But if I were doing this, then there's not going to be a bunch of nitpicking on the handstand push-ups or my row pace, because I think that I could still, like I said in the first video, hold 1,200 cals per hour or faster on the row, and I could do 5 sets of 10, or if I had to fall off, maybe it'd be 4 sets of 10 and then 5-5, like still have pretty good execution.
Yep.
But let's just say that Max is reviewing this with me and I meet all of my goals, but my time's a little bit slower than I was like, oh, I definitely, there's more in my ceiling there. Like there's more potential. When we review it, we could look at the rest times and say, well, Max maybe sees like your first 3 sets of 10 handstand push-ups, you rest exactly 7 seconds between. That's like excellent elite level.
Like kicking off and then kicking back on.
But then my last 2 sets of 10, there was 14-second rest and then a 20-second rest. Okay, well, maybe we can reduce that back down to get close to my 50 strict handstand push-ups for time. And if you know that as an athlete, which I do know that, and we know that with a lot of our individual clients, we can start refining that and learning how to reduce our rest times in that movement. And that seems like such a minor detail, but at the elite level of the sport, that's what they're doing, because they're going to execute on something that's simple like that almost all the way through. The other thing, Max talked about this, from the wall and the handstand push-ups to the row, and when I start pulling, it doesn't seem like a big difference. But if I'm racing Travis Mayer or a Noah Olson and I'm trying to win, they're getting back and they're pulling right away. If I kind of walk back and barely get my feet in and then tighten my feet and then grab the handle, I lose 5 seconds to them. Those little things can make a big difference.
Yeah. To add to that, the little things, getting the rower up to your pace quickly is important. And that should come out in your objective review if your first 10 cals is 3 seconds slower than your last ones, because you got on and you kind of just like pulled kind of softly and recovered before like getting on and 3 pulls up to your working pace. So those little details will start to matter a lot more at the higher levels.
Right.
Down at kind of the intermediate level in a workout like this, I think almost all of it is going to be dictated by observing your 50 handstand push-ups. And most people, it's not going to be 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 5, 5 with 7-second breaks. It's probably going to be, from what I've seen, somebody would kick up and do 10, 5, 3, 2,
singles,
1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And the rest breaks start to get really long. So you can show people sometimes like, hey, you were done with 20 of your 50 handstand push-ups. So you were done with 40% of the work in 2 minutes. And then it took you 9 minutes to finish. That makes sense for you to slow down. And maybe instead of starting with 10-5, just start with 2s right off the bat, or kick up in singles right off the bat. I am so shocked every year, the more beginners, more intermediates, like the people that are following the intermediate path that are stepping into their first or second open where they're really taking it seriously, you can save minutes on something like 50 strict handstand push-up. And it always comes out in the video review because you watch somebody do and you look at it like a mile in the middle of a workout. If they ran their first 400 in a minute and then their last 400s in 12 minutes and they did a 13-minute mile, it's like, all right, well, we got to slow down. People do that same thing in workouts with movements like that.
Yeah. And then when you do that review, you can go ahead and come back to the table when you figure out your training plan and then start practicing it in a different way. So maybe they did do 10, 5, 5, 5 because they want to test themselves. Now it's like, okay, we're going to do a 50 cal row into sets of 2 until failure. And then you can get a feel for, is that faster for me as an athlete? And that'll allow you then, when you do a retest, to actually come up with a better game plan.
Yeah. So it does inform both the repeat and your long-term plan to get better at the sport. Okay. So workout number 2. This one I think is, again, it's not super complicated. You'd be taking your splits of all your double unders. If you missed, you'd be taking what that rest break is for each double under. You'd be taking your transition from...
For the audio listeners, just read the workout one more time.
Yep. 50 double unders, 5 snatches, 50 double unders, 5 snatches, 50 double unders, 5 snatches. Weight increases per round from 145 to 185 to 225. So in that workout, you're doing the same thing. You're doing double under, time to complete. Are there any breaks in there? If there are a break, was it a miss where you just executed wrong, or was it a planned break? And if it was a planned break, how long was the rest time in there? Then from finishing the double unders to putting it down and actually starting the pull of the first snatch is what I would call your transition there. Yep. Then you do your first snatch. You're either doing them touch and go or singles, or you said you would do singles, right?
Yes,
for all
sure.
of them. So if you're doing singles, you'd say, okay, how much rest is in between? If you're probably doing the singles, you're finishing it, dropping it down to the ground and picking it up. You'd see, like, is it worth putting that there's a rest time in there? Or are you just saying 5 singles, it took 12 seconds or something like that? Then you do the same thing back to the double unders, same thing back to the snatches, back to the double unders, back to the snatches. And for this workout, there's no rep breaks because they're kind of all planned rep breaks. So I think at that point, you're looking at what's the rest time between the lifts at the 2 heavier bars. For most people, especially at a higher level, because you're probably doing 50 double unders unbroken, the only thing you're going to change in this workout on a repeat is going to be transitional speed and rest between lifts. Yeah. So each workout has a little bit of a different profile of what you're looking for in a video review. The more practice you get, the more you get better at strategizing, because you start to look at a workout right off the bat and be like, okay, here's the separator. This is where the workout's going to be won or lost. And this is where I'm going to be challenged in it. So this process, I said it in the beginning, it's this kind of circular loop, but this process really does feed your ability to strategize well so much.
Totally.
How do y'all think about the double under trips, though, for the different types of athletes? I'm sure for an elite, maybe you just brush over it, but for the majority of people?
The only thing you can do with something like that is try to encourage the next time they do it that they're focused and hit them unbroken. Yeah. And generally,
when you're doing your review, do you account for that time messed up?
You account for it, but it's not something that you can plan in the re-strategize any better unless like they're getting super sloppy and they're missing. So
you would think about that as a training goal.
Right?
Maybe if in the first rounds they were good, but by the end of it they fell apart, that's more of a...
Maybe it's an actionable thing. But like if somebody's doing like 150 in a workout could be pretty hard for I'd say a lower level intermediate athlete, somebody that's still making quarterfinals. And let's say they got tired from the 10 snatches ahead of time. And then that last set was just like, they're jumping up and down and their arms are swapping and they're missing. I might look at that as like technical breakdown from pacing. But for the most part, I think I'm just looking at like those errors as an opportunity for me to tell the athlete like, hey, when we repeat it, if you're able to go unbroken, which I think you can, because I try to use positive psychology to influence their belief. If you do, you can save X amount of seconds. But it's not something you can say like, well, the next time you do it, don't go unbroken and they can guarantee. Some of it is just having the skill to do that.
But Chris, you bring up a good point because, and especially with a workout like this, you also in your video review are looking at the technical aspects of the movements. So if your double unders look really clean in round 1, but then they get a little sloppy in round 2, and then my hands are really wide and I'm kind of piking with my jump in round 3, that's something that Max and I, as my coach, should talk about, right? Like, okay, how do we clean this up? And like at some point, there's a fatigue threshold that you start getting really sloppy with your movement. And then the same thing's true with the snatches. Maybe 225, I look really crisp if I'm just doing singles out there on the floor, but I get to that in this workout and there's some kind of technical issue in the lift.
Shorting the pull.
Yeah, whatever it may be. Those are things that we can talk about. And it's still, it's less about let's turn around and retest this and make it a perfect pull. It's more about that's a training priority for me so I can get better when it really does matter in the open or quarterfinals or whatever.
Yeah, it's that subjective information can help you focus your mind for the next attempt.
Yeah.
So let's say I'm coaching and I watch somebody do this workout. Let's say it was Brandon and he missed 3 times in his third double under set and his arm started to drift too wide. Then he missed 2 snatches at 225 in the 5 set. And one of them, he was leaning super far forward because he pushed the bar out. And the other one, he shorted his pull and dived under and he had the kind of forward miss both times. I can, in my subjective discussion with him, or give him an actual cue while he's doing the workout, like, hey, remember, hands in, hands in.
Yeah.
So that way the likelihood of missing is not there. Now, if you don't have a coach there or somebody to help guide you through it, you can also do that. Like you pick up the rope in your last set and you're like, all right, remember, hands in. Totally. Because that's just a little cue can remind you, or I missed both of those lifts because I went and pulled too early. I need to make sure I set my back and get into a good starting position before I lift. That little verbal cue or mental reminder can help you like execute well. It's like having little checkpoints in a movement. But
that's another reason why having video makes sense, because it could feel like my hands are going wide, but it could be something else. I need to watch the video to know what's going on. Maybe it's just the way that I'm jumping, or I'm kind of mistiming the jump, or the pull. Maybe I think it's not setting my back, but it is just shorting my pull. You need to watch the video, have video of your workout so that you can then objectively see what the error is.
Not to sidetrack us too much, but I know Brandon or both of you guys talk a lot about having different techniques in your toolbox for specific movements. So y'all were talking about technique breakdown where it probably was getting ugly in a non-ideal way. But I know you reference having like multiple burpee techniques,
sure,
like that you alternate depending on how fatigue's building up with the movement combos. And would that be another good spot to be able to, in the video review, see maybe I should switch to this technique? Or
with this workout in particular, there's not a ton of different techniques because the snatches just get heavy and you need to have pretty clean technique. Now, the row and burpee, that last workout, maybe your burpees get sloppy, but it's just like allows you to finish. Performance matters most in a performance setting. So in other words, like you just want the fastest time, and maybe that means your technique goes out the window a little bit, but still movement efficiency or like movement economy, using less effort per rep is kind of the king in the sport. So we want to dial it in to make it as efficient as possible. And that means clean double unders. Like your double unders should look like Travis when he's doing his double unders, or clean snatches. They should look technically perfect, at least within the CrossFit realm.
Yeah. I think these are 3 bad workouts to have different technical things that you can do.
I wasn't asking about these workouts.
Yeah, but generally speaking, I would think of that as a subjective thing. And in the open or quarterfinals, it happens a lot. I mean, we put out the open videos and almost always we give a little bit of a technical thing. Like you watch somebody do wall walks in the beginning, and then you watch them do wall walks in the end of a long workout with a lot of wall walks, and you see they're taking 8 steps and doing all of that stuff. That is not the 3 steps back, 3 steps forward, or something more optimal. Now in the data or the objective review, you'll see, oh, these wall walks are slower per rep. But the subjective, like technical thing is, how do I make them still go faster when I'm tired?
Right.
And I think those are where the technical things can help you go faster. But it's very hard to develop all of those technical tools unless you've practiced a sport for a really long time. It's not something that you're going to like.
But that was my question though, is by watching these kind of things, isn't that how you learn where you might need?
Yep.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think that that's extremely important. But you are playing off of like, should I be more efficient or should I be faster? Usually those things go hand in hand. But to the wall walk example, maybe I have one wall walk left and the only way to do it is 8 steps back because I'm completely blown up. It's worth just going and doing the 8 steps back as opposed to my 4 steps back, 3 steps out, like I want people to do because I can get it done without having to rest.
Yeah. Also, there are movements though, like power snatch with a light barbell. I feel like the fastest way is not always the efficient way. Right?
Totally.
So there is, if you watch yourself, you'll find your patterns.
Yeah.
And then as you watch other people do the sport, I think that's where you find out other ways to technically change that you can play with. Because you'll almost default into what makes sense for how your body operates.
Yeah.
Like somebody says, do a burpee. Some people naturally will fall hip first. Some people will naturally spread their legs in the back. So people will get these like, okay, your body does it this way to start. And that's probably because it's the most efficient for where your current fitness is. But those tweaks over time can happen if you watch other people, watch yourself, and learn to refine those little details.
And maybe we can come back and do a movement like type, probably not a podcast, but like on the floor things. Because I think the big thing would be not just your technique, but how the movement combos affect. It's like now I wasn't anticipating I was going to be blown up here. So how do I adjust X?
Yeah. And that's like elite level thinking, but even the average CrossFitter can start thinking that way of like, how do I adjust my movement patterns to still get through this workout?
Maybe we'll come back and do those. Sorry to get you off track.
No worries. Workout number 3. So this one, 10 rounds for time, 15 cal row, 15 burpees. So to not like overdo the row thing, you're going to get the row data the same way as you get the other one. You're getting splits probably by per 5 cals there since it's 15 of them. Then transition to the burpee until you start your first burpee, speed of all the burpees, and then transition back to the rower. So on this workout, the separator is going to be a lot of times, what are the transitions? Because there are so many transitions in this workout. You're going back and forth 19 times between. If that's a 1 second difference for each transition, which usually it's like 3 to 5 seconds different, you're talking about like 2 minutes plus in the workout just in transitions.
Yeah, we talked about this as like the top end time, if there were no transitions, would be 15 minutes for like a good athlete. And I assume like if I could hold 1,200 cals an hour on the row, that's 45 seconds, 3 seconds per burpee, that's 45 seconds, that's 90 seconds per round, 15 total minutes. But we know like no one's going to be able to hold that because they have all these transitions. And then there is going to be some deterioration. If there's not, then you probably actually miss pace. Like there's going to be a little bit of a drop off. You overpace the workout if there's no drop off and a huge kick at the end. But we want to minimize that deterioration as best we can. So then after we are getting these splits, the next thing I'm having an athlete look at in rounds for time workouts like this is what does round 1 look like? What does, let's say, maybe round 5 look like? And then what does round 10 look like? And is there this huge drop off? Wow, round one was 90 seconds. Let's say that's what I held. But then round 5 was, I don't know, maybe 1 minute and 50 seconds. And then round 10 was 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Okay, there's some kind of mispacing there that I need to figure out as an athlete. And then I look at my transitions. Did they slow down? Was my burpee pace, did that slow down? Did my row pace slow down? And then we can start having this subjective talk after that.
Yeah, and I think that, like, having that data, like, okay, you have time for all 10 rounds. And let's just say you went out, round 1 was great, round 2 was great, 3, 4, 5, 6, you got crushed. 7 was good. Then 8, 9 were not good. And then 10, you got a second win because it was the end of the workout and it was really fast. If you have that objective data, you can sometimes coach yourself to be like, okay, the crux of this workout where it's going to be most mentally hard is going to be that round 3 to 7. So I want to slow down my first 2 rounds. I want to make sure I'm disciplined there, and I want to have less of a kick at the end, but I still want to kick a little bit. And you want to flatten your curve of performance out. Just knowing that can help you manage your energy as you're going through it and help your self-talk and help you remind yourself what your paces need to hold. So the objective data and the subjective discussion kind of tie together into a better strategy for the second time you try to execute it.
Yeah. And the other part of the subjective side would be, let's just say I'm talking to Max before the workout and I do say, I want to hold 1,200 cals per hour on every single round. Like I think I can hold that and that's going to keep me around 45 seconds. Obviously you get in and out of the row, it's going to slow you down a little bit. And I want to hold 3 seconds per burpee. I do the workout and maybe I'm there for the first 3 rounds, but then there is some drop off. The rest of the rounds I'm holding, 10, 50 cals per hour on the row and my burpees go to 4 seconds per rep. I assumed that I could hold a pace that clearly I couldn't. So then the conversation needs to be with Max of, is it my fitness that's slowing me down? Did I go out too hot? Is there some kind of technical, like there's an improficiency with the row or the burpee? So all of these little topics still come out from the objective data that we have. The first step, though, as we keep saying, is looking at the split times. And then from there, we come up with a conversation about what I need to work on.
I just had the thought that if we're doing the last one, I will do it with you, and we can do that as our example video review. Because I could do the burpees in row.
Oh,
you'll crush me.
Gross.
Yeah, Brandon's doing all 3 of these workouts.
Brandon can do all 3, but I'm not doing all 3. Unless you time cap me on one, then I'll just do a couple handstand push-ups.
It's like, all right, I'm done. That's by far the worst one. It's one that anybody could do. Yeah,
I feel like it would give a good, because 150 burpees is like over my threshold of being able to compete. So I think you'd see deterioration, and there would be like more things that we could look at to show how an elite level score thinks about a repeat and what they could do better, and how an intermediate level athlete generally will not execute as well. And there'll be time that you could find in there.
Yeah. And even for an elite level score, you'll see that top end time, when you add in all the transitions, there's a huge gap there. So as an athlete, you really need to be honest about how long it takes me to get in and out of a rower, how long it takes me, if we're doing bar facing burpees, for example, get over to the bar, or if I'm doing it at 6-inch reach, how long does that take me? How am I setting up my floor plan to make sure that I'm being as efficient as possible in my transitions? And then there will, again, be some deterioration. There always is. It's just minimizing that deterioration. And if you can minimize that, you still start out pretty hot as an elite level athlete, but minimize it down, like round 7, 8, and 9 still are pretty fast, you're going to do well in a workout.
Yeah. I mean, that's really one of the major goals that you'd have with an effective strategy, is getting your performance output to be as linear across as you can. Now, that's the standard. I don't think that most workouts you ever see people at the standard, and some workouts you can't really, they're not apples to apples, right? Like a 15, 12, 9, it's very hard to say it's the same pace in your rounds of 15 as 12s as 9s. But when you're going through, generally speaking, if there's an amount of work that you're having to do, whether it's a round or whether it's one part of a chipper, you want to try to go through the workload as linearly as you can. You don't want to have, I did the first 70% of the work in the first minute, and the last and 30% took me 2 minutes. That's like a quick way to look at your objective review and be like, okay, I mispaced this because I totally blew up. And I want to, if you're doing a repeat, you're trying to like minimize that blow up.
Yeah. The last thing I would say, and you mentioned this a few seconds ago, or a few minutes ago, I guess I should say, you talked about reviewing other people's videos as well. And that has been so helpful for me as a coach, in that I will watch the best people in the sport. Like, I'll just go on YouTube, watch Matt Frazier, watch Tia Toomey, watch all these people. How are they pacing workouts? How are they, to Chris's question, changing their technique on light power snatches versus heavy power snatches, or, really fast paced sprint burpees versus maybe a 10 round for time workout like this. And I just take some notes, and then I will share those notes with athletes to say, hey, this is how they do it. Now, it's not going to work for everyone because there's a different level, but if there are little things that we can kind of glean from other people, it's going to help us be a better athlete.
I agree.
Do you think people should pick people a little bit above their level to go look at, or is
I do it with everyone.
Yeah, I would say that the best information you're going to get is from people who are better than you, who are more experienced. Because
should they go to the tippy top? Should I be going watching Tia right away, or?
You'll learn a lot, but it will not be super actionable right off the bat, most likely. If you're an intermediate athlete, right? Like, you watch how they transition and how they do things, it's usually not like relatable. It's not possible. Even if you think that you're going to do it, it's not, your fitness isn't going to be there, but there is a lot you could learn from it. So I still think it's a worthwhile exercise to go through, because it gives you concepts. Like, you watch how, they're way more linear. The first round and the 10th round were only 2 seconds apart. Mine were 30 seconds apart. So you're looking at those kind of principle driven things. If you're watching somebody at the top level, if you're watching somebody, like if you got to have a training partner that beat you by a minute or something like that, and they're next to you, sometimes analyzing them while they go can give you a lot of good information. So I'd always say, if you're watching to learn something, watch from faster paces.
Yeah. But it also, with your peers, Max, to your point, I think that really helps. I'll tell people all the time, like, if you're trying to make top 10%, go and watch a couple other people and just see their pacing plan before you go. So, okay, I need to be a little bit faster than that. And then you can write a better pacing plan. Sometimes that means you're going a little bit hotter than you want to, but if you need to beat a certain time, that allows you to do so.
Yeah. The open is the best place to see that play out, because you find things like that burpee pull-up shuttle run workout that people found out that you could walk and do better on in the workout. Those little things come out because so many people are competing watching other people, coming up and trying new strategies, experimenting, sharing the information. So really anytime you dig into the process of how other people are doing it, if they're around you or slightly better, you'll learn how to strategize better in the future.
Yeah.
This is probably like a dumb question. Let's say it's like a bubble semifinal person, right?
Yeah.
That person who never does the video review versus the person who does video review, how much of a difference, and I know we're just winging it, but how much do you think it really matters? What's the percentage increase?
I mean, I think it's huge. Every single professional sport in the world, like football, mandatory video review. Divers watching themselves, sprinters filming themselves with high resolution cameras to get their starting position, weightlifters using dartfish trying to analyze and track.
Kobe, that was his whole shit.
Yeah.
Was just video review.
The fact that people say they're competitive and don't do it, to me, is indicative that they are underperforming. Like they are consciously making the choice not to do. Like people always talk about the grind and the hustle being the hard work in the gym. And I do think many elite CrossFitters are tough as shit and do that work. But I think a lot of times sitting still for somebody who's really good at competitive CrossFit and watching themselves do a workout and criticizing is actually harder for them. That's why they don't do it. But I think it creates such an increase in progress. I'd say it's hard to put a percentage on it, but I would say that you get 20% better at executing, or 20 to 50% better at executing the first time you do a workout more efficiently.
Yeah. And not only that, you get better at the things you need to work on because you can identify them or it's easier to identify when you do video review than otherwise.
Yeah. So it's huge, but I'll agree. It was a shitty question.
Well, to put an actual number on it.
I'm just kidding.
Well, but to the point though, that's what gets you the self-awareness so that the next time we can come full circle. You're making a better strategy next time. You're hopefully executing better next time.
You communicate better. Is big. And also like David Bradley's going through the exercise of doing this multiple times a week. What it helps do with us also is it helps me help him strategize, because if you don't, I can't sit and watch every single training video that he does and every Metcon that he does, because then it's just not enough time in the day to do that. But if it's your journey and you're doing that, and then you go through and you're like, hey, I watched my video, these are my splits. It's pretty quick to go through and then start to gain tendencies. And when I see tendencies, then I can communicate back with him more effectively and help when I'm in the workout of asking subjective things like, hey, this last 10 reps, of snatches, you got to be, 3 seconds on between reps. Do you want me to count them off? And it allows us to come up with strategies to teamwork workouts. So I think do it for the subjective side of helping your team support you, do it for the objective review of your own repeats, and then do it for the process of guiding your own training, of figuring out what are your patterns and how do you get better at them.
Yeah. Okay. So you sold me on doing it. Should I just start filming everything, or is there what's the start filming yourself starter kit look like?
Ooh, yeah. It depends on how much time you're going to dedicate, I'd say. If you are going to commit to every day doing it, I think that picking, at the minimum, we're coming into open prep. At the minimum, do all of your Metcons.
Well, at the time of filming, but.
Yeah, at the time of filming. Well, I think, because people might watch this. Yeah. At the time of filming, people are coming into open prep. In open prep, I'd say you're probably doing a lot more Metcons. Let's say you're doing 2 to 5 a week. Prioritize watching those first, because those are the sport sides of it.
Yeah.
And then prioritize the technical lifting at above 90% of your 1 rep max, because then you can start to make technical changes to things that are tested, because 1RM strength stuff and Metcons are kind of the 2 things that you'll see in a sport setting. So those would be the 2 things I'd start with.
Yes, I agree. I think I would give a caveat, because I've seen this happen too. The athlete that is too overly analytical, that can burden you to the point of leading to almost no success, because you just
burn out.
Yeah, you just completely burn out. So just if you're that type of person, someone that really likes to dive in and is very analytical, that's a great trait to have, because you can really dial in your paces. But if you do it 5 times a week plus with all your lifts, the tendency is that you're spending so much time thinking about that you actually just end up being like an overpacer.
Overthinker.
And you can't get better that way either. So there's extremes on both ends, but I love the idea of at least a few times a week and pick those Metcons. Like, so compete, for example, when we do our open prep cycle, we have a couple each week where we say, this is one that is a true test, right? So like, let's say it's a Monday and then a Saturday. These are 2 true tests. That's what we're telling people to film. And that also, they're going through this whole process. Step 1 is you're assessing the workout. You're coming up with your rep speed. You're coming up with your paces, your transitions, and they'll write it all out. And then they'll do the workout. Okay, did I execute? You can do that analysis. And then they'll do their video review. If you do that a couple of times a week, you'll get really good at it before the open.
Yeah. I take it back now that you said that 5 days a week would be too much.
I think for elite level athletes, at some point, they need to be doing it a lot.
Yeah. I mean, elite level athletes, I think, should watch their training back almost every day. Because that's what how much film do the best football players in the world watch? I mean, we had to watch
hours and hours and hours.
Yeah. And I remember hearing Kobe talk about watching athletes to see tendencies in how they move and where they take the ball and what hand they go to the basket with on a regular basis. I think that level of attention to detail, if you truly want to be your best version of yourself as a competitor, you do need to be a little bit obsessive. So you're not going to give yourself the competitive edge to be great by watching yourself back all the time. And yes, you can become too analytical and then you try to rely on strategy when sometimes it's toughness that separates.
Fitness.
Right? I think that's fitness. The key right there. Yeah. It's like, it's that's what you're leaning into. It's not that you're over analytical. It's that you're over analytical and you're not bringing the heat when it matters.
Right.
You can't rely. So I'll tell everyone to do video review because it'll make you better.
Yeah.
But you can't rely on thinking that you can think your way through getting better. Yeah, some of it is.
That's a better way to put it.
Yeah, I think 50 said it best. Sunny days wouldn't be special if it wasn't for rain. Joy wouldn't feel so good if it wasn't for pain. So you got to still go through the pain to get the reward, you guys.
Oh my
you thought I wasn't going to hit you with 50, baby.
I forgot about that.
I still only know one of his songs, In the Club.
Of course.
Something in the club. I don't know how it goes. All right.
Well, that's it.
Info.
That's video review. Anything else, Chris?
Nope. I guess now go back and watch the first one and just keep watching them in a circle.
I want anybody who has gotten to this point in our 3rd podcast about this that wants to see Brandon do all of these workouts to put a comment.
You got to do it with him.
So maybe if you're watching these well into the future, those videos will already be available, which hopefully will be in the links in the description right now.
But
if not, stay tuned.
Enjoy, folks.
Brandon will be 60 by the time we get it done.
Oh,
hopefully that recorded.
Limited space remaining, Chris.
Okay, we're good.